Right, well, the SNP leader and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has told delegates at a party conference speech earlier today that Scotland can make independence a success and to never let anyone tell us otherwise. She also said that she believes that for Scotland, the problem is not just which party is in power at Westminster. The problem is just Westminster. Let's have a quick listen to, I was going to say some of Sturgeon's greatest hits, but as someone who sat through the entire hour of it, I think it's more likely to say lowlights. Anyway, take it away.
This beautiful, magnificent country of ours is bursting with talent, creativity and ingenuity. We also have a sense of solidarity and common purpose that, yes, our political debate can sometimes obscure. Conference, Scotland has got what it takes to be a successful, independent country. It has it in abundance. Never let anyone tell us otherwise.
Yes, rather a lot else to get stuck into from that Sturgeon speech as well, but that's what happens, I suppose, when somebody talks at you for an hour. Let's hear from my large panel this evening. I've got James Bundy, the Conservative councillor in Falkirk. He's against Scottish independence. The former editor of the Sun newspaper, Calvin Mackenzie, also joins me with his strong views on Sturgeon and her independence campaign. Also here this evening, Peter Young, who's a Scot living in England against independence, and Austin Sheridan, a former SNP Glasgow City councillor who is pro-independence. I must say, it's nice to have someone who's got some kind of connection to the SNP actually appear on the media down here, but there we go. Calvin Mackenzie, I will start with you, former editor of The Sun. Should we just nip this in the bud, do you think, and the UK divorce itself from Scotland as opposed to the other way around?
Yeah, no, I agree with Luke. I'm in favour of their self-determination. After all, we had a Brexit vote, and so we as a country, the UK, was in favour of self-determination, so why shouldn't the Scots have it? And there would be one other major reason. I would actually like to get them off the payroll. And I'd also, actually, in a rather, this is a rather humorous point, I'm rather not interested in their football results either. So I could listen to more of my local ones. But the important point was that as the way that the Barnett formula was put together, and you'll remember, actually you won't remember, Patrick, but I don't know, I think it must have been in the early 70s. I think Joel Barnett, who was like Chief Secretary of the Treasury, was actually ordered, come up with a good idea to give the old jocks some more money, and they came up with this formula so that so government spending per head in Scotland is like north of 2,000 quid, and even the poor people of Wales, I think, only get about 1,500 quid. So the Scots do very well out of the rich southeast of England because they're the only people that actually generate any wealth for the rest of the nation. So for two reasons, I'd like to see them go. Reason number one, I believe in self-determination, and if there is a vote and they want to go, God bless you. And I feel about that about Wales and Northern Ireland. And also, secondly, because I'd actually like to have more of my own money in my pocket rather than going into the pockets of the Scots.
All right, I'll throw it over to SNP, former SNP member for Glasgow City as well, who is joining me there. Austin Sheridan, there we are. Thank you very much. Austin, what is independent about leaving the UK and rejoining the EU?
Because the EU is a collective of independent countries. It doesn't operate in the same way that United Kingdom does. What you'll find is that in the EU is that there isn't a level playing field. I mean, if you look back to, say, the Lisbon Treaty, for example, one country, Ireland, blocked it, and then it did have to get amended and then revisited in order for that to be implemented. Whereas the nature of the Union of the United Kingdom, that is not how we work.
Austin, you get to elect... Yeah, but you get to elect people here, whereas if you rejoin the EU, you are led by an unelected cabal, aren't you, Austin?
Well, if we rejoined the EU, we would get to elect members of the European Parliament that can contribute. But the nature of the European Union and the way that union works is completely different to the nature of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is not a family of nations or a family of equals. It is dominated by the southeast of England that elect the majority of Westminster MPs. Now, if we choose to remain part of that system, then we have to accept that. But I'm suggesting that we shouldn't remain part of that system.
OK, I can see a lot of head-shaking going on everywhere, actually. It's a proper row, this. We'd love to see it. James Bundy, the Conservative councillor in Falkirk, your views on what Nicola Sturgeon had to say, because she says that the Tories have launched a full frontal attack on devolution.
It was utterly predictable what Nicola Sturgeon would be saying today. Her drivel during conference was dangerous and divisive. She says she detests the Tories when she accused Labour of chucking Scotland under the bus. No leader should be using that language, particularly when Scotland is in such a divisive state. The abuse that we get in politics today is at a level that's unacceptable. And when Nicola Sturgeon uses words like that, it just stokes the tension up even more. On the point of Scotland in the Union, I believe Scotland empowers the Union. I believe the Union empowers Scotland. I think it's a two-way relationship. The comments from the two previous guests actually contradicted each other. One said that the Union benefits Scotland at the expense of the southeast of England. The other says the southeast benefits at the expense of Scotland. Those two arguments cannot stand up with each other. The Union benefits Scotland greatly. Economic stability, shared currency, armed forces, membership of G7, G20, NATO, UN Security Council. Separating Scotland from the UK.
You've raised some really good.
Organisations.
Yeah, some really good points there, and some, as far as I can tell, relative unknowns. Peter Young, I'll bring you in now, who is a Scot living in England. So thank you very much for joining us. If Scotland did vote for independence, are there not some unanswered questions in terms of what currency the Scots might use, how indeed it might defend itself, for example? Peter, your views?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nicola Sturgeon is really desperate for the Supreme Court not to allow this referendum, because I think she knows perfectly well there'll be a complete economic collapse. And I'm sorry, Kelvin, we'd have to come in the UK and bail them out again. I mean, what would happen is that because there's a huge budget deficit of 24 billion now covered by the UK government, they'd have to borrow money to cover that deficit. They'd have to pay hugely high interest rates because they have no borrowing track record. And also, people would know that they would have to devalue the currency at some point. They want to go with sterling, but they can't do that. They can't do that for very long. So no one would actually lend them any money. And if anyone who daft enough to do so would do it at hugely high interest rates. The result would be taxes would go shoot right up. Public spending would have to be slashed. There would be huge capital, and so wages would be affected. People would have their mortgages in a foreign currency, and the mortgage would go up by 20-30%, the amount of the depreciation. There would be huge capital flight, and this so-called talent, creativity, ingenuity, which does indeed exist in Scotland, would be hot-footing it across the border out of Scotland. There would be a total collapse, and we'd have to bail them out.
Well, I just want to bring our friend Austin Sheridan back in on that, who's a former SNP Glasgow City Councillor, before I go, actually, the way this panel is laid out, ironically, further up north to Kelvin Mackenzie. But I'll start with you on this one, Austin. You'd be skint and everyone would leave.
Absolutely not, and we're looking forward to the papers that are going to be published very, very shortly to outline in more detail what the economic case for independence is going to be. But just to answer the currency question straight up, is that the plan is to move to a Scottish pound and move away from sterling. Now, obviously, in the event of Scotland voting for independence, there would be a transition period, but we would aim for that to be as short as possible, and we would establish a
what if we drag it out?
Scotland as the lender of last resort. But if we're talking about what's divisive, right?
What if we made that as difficult as possible for you, Austin, though, to be fair? What if we just made that as difficult for you as possible, a little bit like that group of people that Nicola Sturgeon wants to rejoin now in Brussels? We made that as nightmarish as physically possible for you, undercut you at every possible opportunity, and dragged it out long enough, so long, deliberately so, that maybe people decided that they actually wanted to rejoin.
Well, I very much doubt that would be the case, because that would be self-inflicting damage to the rest of the United Kingdom, so there would be no benefit whatsoever in that happening. But if we were talking about, I mean, if we can just address what the Tory councillor was saying about Nicola Sturgeon being divisive and talking about detesting the Tories, I mean, I would say that the Conservatives have been the most divisive political party the United Kingdom has seen in a very long time. You know, partying while people are dying. We've got a Home Secretary that says that her dream is to send immigrants to Rwanda. I mean, that kind of behaviour is disgusting. So while we'll not be taking lectures from any Tory about what a leader should and shouldn't be saying, when they've got leading politicians coming out with such ridiculous statements, inhumane statements, this is why we need independence. We can't afford to pay the price of this government.
OK, all right, Kelvin, I'll throw it back to you, because a couple of other things, as far as I can tell, Scottish independence would mean that Nicola Sturgeon remarkably didn't seem to mention in her SNP speech there is men in female prisons and children being able to reassign their gender at schools without having to consult their parents, a highest drug death rate in Europe, more than a quarter of children in Dumfries and Galloway living in poverty, and Humza Yousaf being accused of massaging NHS waiting times. Do you think an independent Scotland would be a nice place to live, Kelvin?
I think she's in a degree of difficulty herself. I mean, the truth about the matter is, when King Charles was in, I think, Dunfermline last week, he got a big cheer, and there were as many boos as there were cheers for Sturgeon, which is a remarkable turnaround from where it would have been a year, 18 months ago. So clearly the atmosphere in Scotland, and actually Labour, as our Scottish friend will affirm, are actually, strangely, doing rather well. I mean, the truth about the matter, they're like 30% at the moment, which is an unheard of figure this last 10 or 50 years. The truth about the matter is, as far as the English are concerned, Scotland has always been a foreign country. It's either been run by a cabal, a total majority of Labour MPs, or currently now virtually a total majority of SNP. And we don't have anything to do with that. We're down here in the south making money, trying to get on with our lives, sending money up by train up to Glasgow every so often to bail out the tenements. Honestly, thank you very much. It's been a very enjoyable 300 or 400 years. It's time to say farewell. Stand on your own feet and let's find out whether you're right or wrong about whether you can survive.
James Bundy, the Conservative councillor at Falkirk, I will give the final say over to you on this. One thing I will say that I thought that Nicola Sturgeon has got a case for is that the Tories have not really done themselves any favours when it comes to promoting the economic strength of a union at the minute. We have got a cost of living crisis.
Well, the Conservative government have made an unprecedented intervention when it comes to energy prices, the energy cap, and this will help individuals, families and businesses across the UK when countries around the world, particularly in Europe, are seeing energy prices rise. So this is a sign of the economic strength of the United Kingdom. And Nicola Sturgeon wants to rip that strength up. She wants to create a gigantic deficit, as one of the panelists said. She wants to raise taxes, cut spending. That's the only way she can finance this fantasy of hers. Scotland empowers the union. I completely disagree with Kelvin. Scotland is not a foreign country. We are one United Kingdom. It's worked successfully for 300 years. Long may it continue.
I found the way that we've managed to stoke more division now amongst several different people than I think any referendum would ever done. But Peter, I've realised, sorry, I misspoke earlier. I'll give the final say to you because I've only given you one answer so far. Who do you agree with more? Is it Kelvin McKenzie that people down south are lobbing a load of money back up north, or the people up north are helping to pay their way as well? I mean, you've made the move down south. Presumably you're quite happy here and you're here for a reason.
Well, we had, Kelvin was wrong in his first comment. We had a so-called once-in-a-lifetime referendum to discuss this and decide this in 2014, and a clear majority decided against independence. Around 2/3 of Scottish voters, according to opinion polls, they're against having another referendum now. It's just talked about by Nicola Sturgeon as a distraction from the a very poor performance of her government. I mean, the one thing that has been a great success in Scotland under Sturgeon, it must be said, is the anti-growth coalition that she leads. Economic growth in Scotland has been half the level of the rest of the UK. That means greater poverty, greater unemployment, fewer businesses, 4 billion fewer tax receipts, 11 billion less economic activity per year. It's just been a disgrace. So they need to have something to talk about, particularly to wind up their own supporters. But it's a fantasy. It's not going to happen. Sorry about that, Kelvin. The UK is stronger together, much stronger together. That's
Sturgeon on the phone.
Sure
She's angry.
I think someone is ringing to complain already, yeah.
Yeah.
We're much better off together. It's a much stronger country. It would be very foolish from a defence perspective to split it apart, and it's just a lot of nonsense being spouted by Sturgeon to distract attention.
All right, look, all of you, thank you very, very much. I really just wish we could have done an entire show like this, actually, to be honest with you, but I think I've got to go over and talk about mortgages or something now. But all of you, thank you so much. Great to have you on the show. We've got James Bundy, Conservative councillor at Falkirk. He's obviously been up alongside former editor of The Sun newspaper Calvin Mackenzie, and as well as Peter Young, who's a Scot living in England, and Austin Sheridan as well, former SNP, Glasgow City councillor. Austin, thank you very much, especially, actually, I must say, because it's easy to get outnumbered, especially here, and so we do appreciate you fighting the good fight. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK. Ooh.